In 2016, you said it was President Obama's fault that homicides were up in Chicago. So why was it the president's fault then, but it's not your fault now?
Chicago is a disaster. The mayor is saying, don't come in. The mayor is telling us not to come in. At some point, we can void that if we have to, but we may have to at some, because it's out of control. I assume she's saying that for political reasons. I think it's negative political reasons. She's a Democrat. I'm going to be nice. She's a Democrat. She's making a big mistake. People are dying in Chicago and other cities, and we can solve the problem. They have to ask us, but we can solve the problem.
Why was it President Obama's fault in 2016? You credited it as him.
Because President Obama was invited in, and he did a poor job. President Obama could have gone into Chicago. He could have solved the problem, and he didn't. In our case, they don't want us in. We can solve the problem very easily. We're equipped with the best equipment, the best people, and you see what we're doing. I mean, Portland was coming down. It was busting at the seams, and we went in and protected all the federal buildings. Those federal buildings are totally protected, and we had to do that, and Portland's a very different place than Chicago. But Chicago should be calling us, and so should Philadelphia and Detroit and others, to go in and really help them.
So Obama was responsible for the violence in Chicago during his term when federal authorities didn't go into Chicago, and yet Trump isn't responsible for the violence in Chicago when federal authorities also didn't go into Chicago. Am I getting that right? This is Trump with his usual dissembling after being called out for his hypocrisy regarding blaming Obama for everything during his administration, and yet absolving himself of all responsibility now that he's the president. And so even though neither Trump nor Obama sent feds into Chicago, the reason that it's Obama's fault is that Trump wants to send feds in. Apparently just intending to do something changes the game entirely now. And Trump actually has the audacity here to claim that people are dying in Chicago, which is rich coming from a guy who's currently presiding over more than 140,000 deaths from a pandemic that was avoidable if not for Trump's own inaction. It was him who opted to pretend that it was going to miraculously disappear, and who refused to coordinate a nationwide testing and contact tracing system and produce enough PPE and set a good example for the American people by endorsing stay-at-home orders and mask mandates. But he did none of that because he didn't think it would benefit him politically. And now he's out here grandstanding about saving American lives? Give me a break. And of course, it just so happens that his only issue is with cities in states with Democratic governors. Funny how it always seems to work out that way. In reality, the most dangerous city in the United States is actually St. Louis, Missouri. And yet I haven't heard a word about Trump sending federal authorities into that deep red state. I wonder why. But let's take a step back here. Do you really think this is about violence in Chicago? Or do you think it might have something to do with Trump's desperation to steer the conversation away from his response to the pandemic? There is a reason that city violence has suddenly become all this administration can talk about. And it's not a coincidence that it came at the same time that the number of cases and deaths from coronavirus are surging in this country. Trump needed a boogeyman. He needs something to fearmonger about because the only way the GOP wins elections is by dividing this country through the usual wedge issues. And so what better way to scare rural, white America than by telling them that the dangerous thugs from the cities are eventually going to overrun their neighborhoods too. There is a very specific element at play with Trump's strategy here. It's not very difficult to identify, and it's not unlike every single other strategy he's employed thus far. Keep in mind too, Trump came out today and announced that he's allocating a $61 million grant to offset the defund the police movement and to hire more police officers around the country. In other words, he just cooked up this whole city violence boogeyman and within days allocated millions and millions in grants to fight it. Meaning that if he had wanted to do something about coronavirus, he could have. Look how fast he acted when it was to fund a project that he thought would benefit him politically. Days, just days. And tens of millions of dollars were granted with the stroke of his pen. And yet we still don't have a nationwide testing program. We still don't have enough PPE. We still don't have enough hospital capacity. His swift action with this fake controversy proves that Trump could have done something about coronavirus, but he chose not to. And finally, Trump claims that he needs to send troops into Chicago because of how good a job he's done in Portland. But he's not done a good job in Portland. Portland looks like there is a war happening in the streets. Tear gas is being used against peaceful protesters, journalists are being attacked, people are being apprehended by unidentified federal troops and thrown into unmarked vans. The BLM protest had been subsiding before the federal troops came in, and now, because of that, they're surging again. Trump's decision didn't quell the violence there, it created it. And considering Trump needs these wedge issues heading into November, this may very well be by design. He may very well be inciting this violence because he needed something, anything, to run on in the election that's not his dismal response to coronavirus. And if that means inciting uprisings in every city in the country with the extra legal use of unidentified and brutal federal troops, well, he's already shown that he's more than willing to do exactly that. And don't forget to listen to my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, where I'll take a deep dive into the biggest issues of the week and interview major players in the world of politics, like Adam Schiff, Nancy Pelosi, Beto O'Rourke, Eric Swalwell, Katie Porter, and many more. Again, that's No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, available anywhere you listen to podcasts.